Since you have your Bibles today, we are going to be in the Song of Solomon. We've been in this series, Love Songs, for the past few weeks, and today it's going to get thick. So here we go. I'm going to start here, though. How many of you guys have ever played dodgeball? Raise your hand. Come on, most everybody's played dodgeball before, right? So we know the basic rules of dodgeball. Pretty simple. Everybody gets on two sides. You get a ball. You try to throw it at somebody. You hit them, they're out. They catch it. Maybe you bring somebody back in. And then there's like house rules. No headshots. That's no fun. Like that. What kind of house rule is that? There's the no wall sitting. Sometimes you play the game and you have to start behind this line, but then the lines get closer and closer. So I bring this up because, I did kids and student ministry and all those kind of things for a long time. So I've been involved and around lots of games of dodgeball. It's an easy thing, especially when you got a group of boys together at a camp and just go for it. Play some dodgeball. Well, there's a church that I worked at for a while, and they had a big gym. And every Wednesday night, they had scouting programs for the boys and the girls, and boys will only pay attention for so long until it's time to go do something. And that's something they would always do is bring it to the gym, and it was dodgeball time. And I loved it because the gym had a balcony above on the top, and I could stand at the top, and it was like Roman gladiators for 10-year-olds. This was the pit, and I was about to laugh because it is hilarious watching them dive and jump and get hit right in the midsection. Or, there's that one kid that always thinks he can jump really high. And then they get their feet hit and it's boom, smack face on the ground. And I'm laughing. I mean, it's funny. Y'all should be laughing too. Because if you haven't seen it, it's hilarious. They jump up and they just get their feet underneath them. But it was always just an entertaining time to watch these boys play dodgeball. And as they played, the adult leaders would stand along the perimeter of the wall, and they'd kind of serve as referees. They'd be the ones that are saying, hey, no headshots, you're out, or you got hit. And they're working as refs. And guess what all the boys always hate? They hate the rules. They hate the refs. I did not get hit. They're yelling, they're fighting, and they're always just mouthing off. And there were some days when it was worse. And the guy that oversaw the scouting ministry for the boys, he still does it. He pours into these young men. He's done it for years and years, and his name is Lloyd, and everybody calls him Commander Lloyd. So Commander Lloyd is the one that kind of gets this thing going, and the boys are being extra salty this week. And they're just lippy, and I'm watching from the top, because on Wednesdays, all I did is kind of just, I was like the principal. I didn't have a whole lot of job duty other than just make sure nobody died, okay? And I'm watching, and they're being lippy, and Commander Lloyd does something. He blows the whistle. I'm like, okay, he's had enough of this. And he yells this, no rules. And all the leaders just back away. And it was almost like a hushed calm just fell on the gym for a second. And then it took about 2 or 3 seconds for one of the boys to pick up the ball, get really close to someone and just chuck it right at him and yell, you're out! And the boy turns and he says who? And what was a game turned into just chaos. And the boys are getting super close to each other and they're throwing the balls and nobody's getting out and it's turned into a disaster. And before long, there's boys that are diving, and I'm like, this is now my time as principal. Like, somebody's going to die. And so I come running down to yell at Lloyd and be like, what are you doing? And as I'm coming down, all of a sudden I hear them blow the whistle again. And he says, boys, come here. And he sits them all down. And he pulls a, super ninja move. He's like, I'm going to teach them something from this. And he taught them that the game is a lot more fun when there's boundaries, when there's rules, when there's guidelines. And when you take all those boundaries, when you take all those rules and you get rid of them all, there's no longer a game anymore. It's just chaos. And he said this to them, and it really stuck with me. He said this. He said, boundaries are not the enemy. They're the thing that makes the game worth playing. And I've thought about that, and it applies to so many areas in life. And today, We're talking about love and sex and relationship, but we're living in a world that's shouting, no rules when it comes to love, when it comes to sex, when it comes to relationships. And we're told that freedom means getting rid of the boundaries. That anybody that tries to put any kind of restriction on your sexuality is just trying to keep the fun away from you. They're trying to take it all away. In today's world, it's like we're playing a big, giant game of spiritual dodgeball, but somebody's decided it's better off without the rules. It's better off when we get to just do what we want. We get to ditch the commitments. We can have all the sex we want, no strings attached. We can live the way we want, be with who we want, love is love, all this. It's just eventually devolves into chaos. And it's like that dodgeball game. It's eventually no more fun to play. And a lot of people are coming to this feeling that the thing that's supposed to be fun and thrilling has now become hollow. It's lost its luster. And so when something that you enjoyed becomes hollow, you start to figure out and think of ways of how can I fill that gap in. And we see a society that has become more depraved. The use of pornography is rampant in our society, and it's just looked at as it's normalized. Sexual deviancy is just crazy because there's no boundaries, there's no rules, and people have gotten bored and they have to fill themselves up with other things because it's just devolved away from the boundaries and the things that God has set. And here's something just a point I want us to understand. God's boundaries for love and sexuality aren't about restriction. They're about experiencing life to the fullest within the safety and joy of His divine design. So today we're going to go to Scripture and we're going to talk about sex and love. And we're going to talk about sexuality within the borders and confines of the way that God has given it to us as a gift. And that gift is marriage. The way He wants us to celebrate romance. And I've decided rather than just complain about broken things, let's go to celebrate what God has shown us. We can continue to complain about the way society is, or we can go to Scripture, which we say Scripture is our standard, which means that's where we go. And we can see that God celebrates romance. God celebrates sex. He's given this to us as a gift. So today we're going to go to the Song of Solomon, and we're going to be in chapter 3. And in chapter 3, this couple that we've been watching, seeing them speak back and forth, this is the joy of the wedding day. This is the joy of the wedding day, and then we're going to turn the chapter, and we're going to go to chapter 4, and then we see the joy of the wedding night. And it gets a little spicy, and that's why we're doing baptisms afterwards, just in case you get too spicy, you can jump in the pool. But the woman begins this, and it's chapter 3, and in verse 6, and she's speaking of her man. She says, "Who is this coming up from the wilderness like a column of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and incense, made from all the spices of the merchant?" Think about this. She's calling him like, who's this guy coming like a column of smoke? I want my wife to describe me that way. Like, man, let me explain what this means. In Scripture, the wilderness was always a place of transition, going from a place usually of captivity or barrenness to something new and fresh. There's lots of images and talks of the wilderness. And at one point, the Hebrew people were set free from Egypt and they were in the wilderness. And do you know what they were led by? A pillar of smoke. And she is viewing her man coming out of the wilderness to come to pick her up, and he's like a pillar of smoke. He's not just kicking up dust, he's coming with God. And she sees there's something divine about this thing that's about to happen. It's not just a thing, it's a thing it's been ordered by God Himself. Marriage is not just a human institution, it's a God-designed bond. It's not just something we came up with, it's something that God designed. God designed a man and a woman to be together, and do you know what the first thing the enemy attacked? Marriage. And she's seeing, here comes my guy. And man, he's coming to lead to a new place, but he's coming with the presence of God because this is a divine moment. We're going to go through some things that we want to see are God's design. And the first one is this. In God's design, marriage is a covenant, not a contract. And let me explain the difference. So we live where contracts are common. Almost all of you are under some kind of contract. If you've bought a house, if you rent a house, a car, if you've got a phone in your pocket, you're under some kind of a contract. It's an agreement. If you do this, I'll do this. You provide me with cell service, I'll pay my bill. It's this agreement that you do this, I'll do that. And it's actually based on mistrust. It's mutual mistrust. As long as you do this, I will do that. Think about it. If your electricity company stops turning on your electricity, are you going to be paying that bill? No, because they're not keeping their end of the bargain. It's built off of you do this, I do that. But marriage is meant to be a covenant, not a contract. And here is the major difference. A covenant isn't built off mutual mistrust. It's about mutual commitment to each other. It's not about what can I get from this person. It's what can I give to this person. It's not about holding back until I see, well, if you do this, then I'll do that. It's about saying, I'm going to go above and beyond because this is a relationship built on the foundation of God, and I want to treat you as someone who is made in the image of God. And we live in a world where marriages crumble under conflict, but covenant love doesn't just run when things get tough. A covenant love doesn't just flutter away when things don't go as planned. It's a love that says, even when you're at your worst, I'm not going anywhere. Covenant love is what Jesus gives to us. And marriages are supposed to be a reflection of that relationship. And this matters a lot because a lot of us sometimes see marriage as a contract, as a human institution, instead of a divine thing like she sees as this pillar of smoke coming from the wilderness. And I've had the honor of doing some weddings, and every couple wants their day to be special. They want their day to be perfect. Very few go that way. Trust me, I've been to a lot of them. And I've sat down with couples getting ready for their wedding, and they want to write their own vows. And I'm like, that's great. And their vows usually, they're sappy and really stupid. They're usually like stories of how I first saw you, and it's you're so purty, and it's basically, they're great, but it's like they've seen each other for the first time, and it's like, come on. Those are nice things to say. But I always say, okay, you can say those. I want you to have your part in this, but I make them say, now you're going to make some real commitments and vows to each other. You're going to give some covenant promises to this person that go above and beyond just you're so purty. And it's similar to if you've ever been here on a Sunday night for date night, we have our couples. I read a covenant vow, they hold hands, and then they kiss. Because it's a promise that I'm not going to leave you when things get tough. I'm going to stick with you. And I want them to make some promises together. And then I always make them do something else because I want them to see. I'm about to sign a marriage certificate. That is, it's kind of this legally binding contract thing that we've put into place. But I want them to see that even though we fall under that, and I want you to understand this, married in God's eyes is not something that I recognize, okay? Married in God's eyes means that we fall under the government we have, so we go through the process that they have. But I always make them make a covenant with each other that's a little bit different. If I ever do your wedding, I'm going to make you do this. I give them each a little bag of salt. And I say, we're going to make a salt covenant. And it's a tradition that goes way back even to the Hebrew time because salt was a preservative. It was expensive. It was something that meant a lot. And I have one container, and I have them each pour their bags of salt into the container. And I tell them, just like you now cannot pick out which individual grands of this is mine, this is yours, you're now in a covenant together where you share everything together, where you're bound together, where you're meant to preserve and protect, and it's in the confines of what God has. We need to start seeing marriage as a divine thing, not just as something that we do because it's easy or we're bored or we want the tax write-off. It's something that we do because it's actually been ordained by God. It doesn't mean our marriages will be free from struggles, but it means that in the midst of those, we know that this thing is built on the foundation of Christ. So many marriages aren't built on that foundation, and so they crumble. So we continue on. Seems like a simple thing. She saw him like a cloud of smoke, but it's a divine thing. She sees him coming godly. Verses 7 through 11 in chapter 3, we're going to see some things. And the second thing we're going to see, I'm going to give you the point before we get there. In God's design, marriage is worth fighting for, investing in, and celebrating. In God's design, marriage is worth fighting for, investing in, and celebrating. Verse 7, she's still seeing him coming. Look, it's Solomon's carriage, escorted by 60 warriors, the noblest of Israel. All of them wearing the sword, all experienced in battle, each with his sword at his side, prepared for the terrors of the night. This is like the bachelor party is coming open carry. Here they come. And it sounds strange, but there's some things that it's really speaking to. First off, she's saying, this is a man who I know will keep me safe and protect me. But also he's bringing friends along that are going to fight for whatever we're going through. Marriage is something that's worth defending and protecting and fighting for. And it's also something that we need people around us that are willing to fight for that as well. He's got his friends. And it says 60 mighty warriors. David, his father, they always spoke about the mighty 30. She's like, he's even got twice as much as that. And he's coming to pick me up. Marriage is worth fighting for. And it's not fighting for with swords and guns. It's fighting for with our love, affection, attention, forgiveness. Those are the weapons that we fight with. Solomon, she doesn't stop there. She says, King Solomon made for himself the carriage. He made it of wood from Lebanon. Its posts made of silver, its base of gold. Its seat was upholstered with purple. Its interior inlaid with love. So this thing is expensive. He's gone far and wide to get the materials. Upholstery that was purple was something that was significant and would have cost money. Solomon has invested in this moment. He didn't settle. He didn't settle for ordinary. He went out and he got the materials. He invested in this. She's worthy. He's wealthy. He invested. And it's an illustration of how we should view our marriages, not just giving the minimum, but saying, how extravagant can I go? And here's what I don't mean. I don't mean just money. Solomon was rich. He had this. He spent it. Some of y'all ain't rich. You don't need to be spending all this money on people. Even your spouse, because you can show them you love them in different ways. Especially, let me just encourage some of you who are some of you have gotten married before and you're going to agree with me 100%. Don't be going into debt over a day. I promise. It's not a wise thing to do. I'm talking about your wedding day. It's great. It's beautiful. Don't go into debt over it because you're going to forget it. It's going to go by real quick. Blink of an eye. Boom. It's done. Also, do not buy a ring that you've got to get security detail every time you go out with it. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying be willing to go out of your way to invest in your marriage. Make it a part of your budget to save for things like date night. Invest in little moments when you're just sharing a moment with your spouse, enjoying who they are. It's worth investing in. He went far and wide to get these materials. When was the last time you went far and wide to do anything for your spouse? Think about, how am I investing in this relationship? Then verse 11, she's singing now to her friend. She says, daughters of Jerusalem, come out. And look, you daughters of Zion, look on King Solomon wearing a crown, the crown which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, the day his heart rejoiced. This isn't just a private celebration, it's a public celebration. And she's excited. And it says his heart's rejoicing. He's wearing his crown. He's coming with intention to pick up his bride. And they're both celebrating and inviting others along. Marriage is something worth celebrating. And it's not just worth celebrating on the wedding day. Continue to rejoice and celebrate. Those of you that are married, don't just make it a once a year, it's anniversary and here I bought you this little thing. Celebrate. Live in those times of celebration because the hard times will always come. And you've got to find those moments to celebrate that are more than just the once a year type of a thing. We're going to see how all of this intentionality, it leads to something beautiful. But we've got to fight. We've got to celebrate. Because we turn to chapter 4. And as we turn to chapter 4, we skip the reception. We just go straight to the honeymoon. And we're going to witness a moment that's so intimate and so raw, it's almost like we should not be seeing this or listening to this. And the woman, she'd been speaking of and dreaming about this wedding day, and here he comes to pick me up. The man now is starting to speak because now it's honeymoon time. And he's been holding off. But he's about to describe and go through some things. And this may make you a tiny bit uncomfortable, but it's in Scripture, and it made Joey really uncomfortable. We're going to talk about it. And we're going to go through it. And last week we spoke to singles specifically. What we're going to speak through is for married couples. And I won't get super graphic or detailed, but we are going to go through this and we're going to talk about it. And he starts and he speaks. And he says, "How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veil are doves. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from the hills of Gilead." So he begins by just first praising how beautiful you are. Guys, here's the thing. Sometimes you don't need to just be jumping on your woman. Talk to her a little bit. And he begins by speaking to her the same way he did at the first chapter. He starts to talk about her eyes and her hair. Her eyes being behind the veil means that she's just starting to get undressed. And when he says your eyes are like dove, we've talked about this a few times. Doves were gentle. He's saying you look beautiful, you look gentle. And then he says this weird thing about her hair. Baby, you got a goat head? What is this? All of this, if you ever look up Solomon's thing and they've got the pictures, they look ridiculous. But what he's talking about, this place, Gilead, was the most beautiful place that you could imagine at that time. Green, luscious hills. And as the sheep would come down, they would come down in this beautiful flowing motion. And what he's really seeing is she's letting her hair down. This was a very sensuous act back then. The women didn't just let their hair down. And so she lets her hair down, and he's like, ooh, and he's getting weak in the knees. He knows something is about to happen that's great. And so if your husband tonight says, baby, you got a flock of goat hair, he's getting weak in the knees. He then says, your teeth are like a flock of sheep just shorn. Coming up from the washing, each has its twin. No, not one of them is alone. So, another weird thing. Sheep, a lot of times would get dirty when they would get cut. They're now nice and white. So he's saying your teeth are clean. They're white. All of this seems like, what is the point? He says your teeth all match. So they're at least there. And then he says, they're basically, you've got a full set of them. Each one has its twin. None of them are alone. We think this is funny. This was in a time where you didn't have dental billboards everywhere. So she's got all of her teeth, and he's like, bonus, this is a good day. She's got let her hair down. She's got a full smile of teeth. This is something worth being excited about, especially if you live in Kentucky or Alabama. This is. Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of pomegranates. So he's praising the redness of her lips, the desirability of her mouth. Then he says, your neck is like the Tower of David, built with courses of stone. On it hang 1,000 shields, all of them shields of warriors. So this idea of a tower combines strength and dignity. So he's talking not just about her beauty, but he's talking about her character as well. You're a woman of standards and dignity. There's something dignified about you. So he's going head, he's got eyes, he's talking neck, and then he gets stuck. It says, your breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. Another weird thing to say about breasts is call them twin fawns. But one commentary I read said this: moving down her body, the next thing he focuses on are her breasts, objects of male erotic interest that need no explanation. There's a little explanation that's needed here. One of the first people I heard teach Song of Solomon was a guy named Tommy Nelson, and as he got to this spot, he said, you know what you don't do with little fawns? You don't chase them and go, hey, fawns! Sometimes, guys, when you see breasts, you're like, oh my goodness. And he's like, I'm going to be gentle with you. They're matching. They're beautiful. I'm going to be gentle. And we think it's silly, but he's willing to just continue to be calm and to take it slow. But everything else, he's just given a short description and moved on. He sticks here for just a minute. He says, until the day breaks and the shadows flee, I'll go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. So basically, until the day breaks and the shadows flee, he's Lionel Richieing it, okay? He gets to the breast, he gets stuck, and he's like, all night long. He's ready. He's like, I got this. And he's saying, remember a couple weeks ago, she was describing her breasts like mountains. And he kind of just is like, that's great. But he's pushed away. Now he has stopped himself and he said, I'm ready to go mountain climbing, yodele hee hoo, okay? That's what he's doing. He has stopped here and he's ready. And it's almost like he composes himself and he goes, okay, you're altogether beautiful, my darling. There's no flaw in you. He's using his words to express his emotions and his desires. And it's not just his desires for her physically. Obviously, he thinks that she's beautiful, but relationally, emotionally, he's using his language, and it's not just flattery. It's not just so he can get something. This is truly the emotions that he's feeling, and he's speaking life into her. In God's design, so our third point, communicating feelings of intimate affection is vital and encouraged. If you're not speaking the things you're feeling, that's worthless. Guys, if you think your wife is beautiful, tell her. And you should think your wife is beautiful. Wives, if you think your man is beautiful, tell him. He'll probably think you're lying. But speak words of encouragement and kindness. It shouldn't just be we are with each other physically intimate. Your language and your emotions, he's pouring himself out here. When was the last time you did that for someone, for your spouse? This kind of recognition isn't just nice, it's necessary. So make it a point. If you're married this week, make it a point to speak something kind to your spouse. Send him a text message, tell him something. Don't just wait until one day you're like, oh, we fell out of love. You don't fall out of love. The same way a fire doesn't fall out of fire. You know what you have to do to a fire? You have to kindle it and keep it going. You have to work on making sure it stays aflame. And the same thing is true with your marriage. You don't just fall out of love. You stopped working on it. You stopped using your words to be encouraging. You stopped being emotional with your spouse. So you didn't fall out of love. You just stopped working on it. The way you kindle the affections of a dynamic sexual relationship begins emotionally by using your words. Some of you are like, my sex life sucks. When was the last time that you actually used your emotions and your words with your spouse? So then we go, verse 8, he says, come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Descend from the crest of Amana, from the top of Sinir, the summit of Hermon, from the lion's dens and the mountain haunts of the leopard. Basically what he's saying is he's inviting her to move closer. And a lot of those places he's listed are places of danger. He's saying, I'm going to be a safe refuge for you. Marriage should be a place of safety. He's calling her in and saying he's going to care for her, protect her. Then he says, you've stolen my heart, my sister, my bride. You've stolen my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. How delightful is your love. My sister, my bride, how much more pleasing is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your perfume more than any spice. First off, when he's saying sister, again, it's not because he's from Alabama. That is not what's going on here. It's a term of endearment. He says, I feel close to you. It's a expression of love. And he's saying, you got my heart like locked down. And he talks about her gaze. He says, your gaze has captured me. Guys, we know girls have this ability to lock us down with a look. And there's this provocative look that you can give that gets a guy on lockdown, and that's what she's given to him. And ladies, I want to talk to you for just a minute. And don't get offended by any of this, because there's versions of preaching modesty that are not helpful. They are shaming, and they actually can hinder your intimacy. When I was growing up and I was around church, this is how they taught sex. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. It's bad, it's bad, it's bad. But then get married and it's great. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Sex is good. Sex is a gift from God. But that provocativeness, let me explain it this way. I've walked almost any mall you walk through. You're going to walk by a lingerie shop. Great. But in almost every window of that lingerie shop is a woman who's showing what they sell, but with a look in her eyes that is not saying, hey, let's go have tea. If you've walked through, you've seen these. It's a very provocative look. And as I was writing this, I thought about those posters. And what I wanted us to understand is there's nothing sinful about that outfit or that look. It's just wrong place, wrong time. This is a significant thing. That kind of intimate, powerful expression of desire is not meant for the masses. It's meant for your mister. It's meant for your missus. That is something that is good, but it is not meant for everyone. Let me tell you, that 13-year-old boy that's walking by, he's like, ooh, wow. And it starts down a path that is not healthy. That is meant for marriage. It's sacred. It's meant for someone that you're committed to wholly. So, I would encourage you, when you're married, when you're committed, when you're in that married covenant relationship, get that look, ladies, and boom, make him have a heart attack. Like, it will do it. But save it for that time. Don't just put it out there all the time to try to get attention, because it's going to attract the wrong type of attention. Then, he says, your lips drop sweetness as the honeycomb, my bride. Milk and honey are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. So before there was the French kiss, there was the Hebrew tongue twister, is what we're seeing here. He says, milk and honey are under your tongue. And milk and honey a lot of times are used in reference to like the promised land. Neither milk or honey takes death for it to be produced. And so what he's saying is your kisses are nourishing, life-giving. And when I get to kiss you, it's like I've entered the promised land. Again, he's using this deep, intimate language. And then what I'm going to read is possibly one of the most vividly intimate sections in all of the Bible. It's very graphic. And if you get it, you get it. If you don't, well, then you can ask somebody later. Here we go. You are a garden locked up, my sister, my bride. You are a spring enclosed, a sealed fountain. Your plants are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits, with henna and nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with every kind of incense tree, with myrrh and aloes, and all of the finest spices. You are a garden fountain, a well of flowing water streaming down from Lebanon. She says, awake, north wind, and come, south wind, blow on my garden. That its fragrance may spread everywhere. Let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits. Again, I'm not going to get into everything. Garden does not mean what you think it means. I'll just leave it there. I'll spare all the explicit details because that's what we have date nights for on Sunday nights. Not this Sunday night, but in a couple weeks. Because we talk about that kind of stuff there. But there is a word here that I want us to see that shifts everything. And it's this word where she says, awake. Now, for the past couple chapters, we've seen her say something to her friends. Don't awaken love. Don't rush into this. Don't awaken. And now, this tone has changed. He's approached her with intention. He's brought his emotions. He's brought his finances. He's come and they've done this all in a God-honoring way. And now she is ready for him in his fullness. She's ready for full intimacy. And she's like, awake, come, my lover. But this was a process. And so many now in society have decided just like, it's okay to just hook up and don't tie any emotions to it. That's not healthy. That's not God's way. That's not the boundaries and borders that he has created. In God's design, marriage is the sacred space where the full joy of sexual intimacy is intended to flourish. Remember, sex and intimacy is good. All the married people should be saying what? Yes. Some of you guys are thinking this is good right now, and you're having sex in a boundary that God didn't intend. And yeah, physically it may feel great, but you know what it's going to do eventually? It's going to start to eat at you emotionally. I've met a lot of 20-year-olds who have had lots of partners, but then they get into their 30s, their 40s, and it just feels hollow, and they realize, man, this is not what I should have been doing. Grace is available to all of us. We serve a God of restoration. As I wrap up today, I want everyone to know, whether you're married or not, it's time to get back to God honoring intimacy. He's invited us into this. Whether you've been trusting God with your sexuality or not, today is a new day. I think it's great that we're having baptism today, because some of you guys, you may be like, you know what? I'm going to turn back to God's way and away from the way that I've been trying to do it. Married people, you could be doing the same thing. You might be having sex with each other, but you're actually being intimate with each other. Sex is just the physical act. Are you actually sharing emotions with each other? Do you hold hands? Are you being romantic with your spouse? Like, get back to God's way. It's not just rush into a thing. It's being close with each other. And I would encourage everyone's got a step to take to turn more towards God's way and away from just thinking we can do it on our own. Remember, God will never push us away because of our pain and our scars. He's a God who chases after us. And today, maybe you just need to say, okay, God, I've been trying to do it my own way. But at some point, we have to decide, who's going to be Lord? Is it going to be me, or is it going to be Him? He's the creator of everything. And when you come to that conclusion is when you can finally say, okay, I'm going to trust Him with everything. This is kind of a graphic line, but I've talked to young men before, and they give me that silliness of, man, I want to find the right one, but I got to make sure that, we're sexually compatible and all this mess. And I say, you know what you would never want? You would never want to get married. You have a honeymoon. You guys enjoy each other physically. And then you turn to your partner and you say, man, that was really great. And then if she looked back at you and said, I've had lots of practice. None of us should be out there just practicing. We should be figuring out who can we enjoy this moment with in a boundary that God has created for us. God's design is a blueprint for something beautiful. It's kind of like that dodgeball game. Less rules turned into chaos. God's design is beautiful and it leads to something great. Let's get back to following and submitting and surrendering to that.